Hello, everyone, and welcome to another discussion of Vinland Saga. Today, we are covering Book 10. Book 10. Look at this character on the cover.
He's a wild one.
Yes, and of course, I'm going to do something fun with this thumbnail.
Oh, yeah, it'll be a good one.
We'll see. We'll see. But anyway, I am so delighted to have here as my conversation partner and friend, Merphy Napier.
Happy to
And
be here.
we are so close to finishing
I know.
goodness, what's out anyway. So
Yeah, we're very close because we've got this volume, but then next discussion, we're going to be covering a volume and a half, essentially.
yes, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's right. So everyone, we are covering book 10 here today, and this will be out on a Thursday. And then the following Tuesday, you will find our discussion of book 11 and half of book 12, which is really finishing the third arc.
Yes.
And that's going to be on Merphy Napier Vlogs on
Yes.
Tuesday. So that's what we're up to. And let's just dive in here, Merphy.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on book 10? What do you feel is like sort of sticks out to you from this book in terms of what Yukimura is doing in terms of the themes or characters or whatever you feel like talking about?
Sure. So continuing on with passing on a lineage and with fatherhood and the roles that are expected of us. We, of course, have a lot going on with, let me pick a panel that YouTube might not yell at me over.
There are a few that they might get upset about.
Yeah, right. This little fella, our Floki's grandson.
Balder.
I don't know how the lighting. Yeah, Balder. Thank you.
Yes.
We discussed before about roles. There you go. That's a good one. We discussed before about roles and what's expected of us, and that can be our chains and breaking free of that. And Balder is certainly thrust into this position that Floki wants him to be in. And in this volume, we begin to see that his dreams maybe don't match what's expected of him. And being caught up in this war and in this expectation really isn't good for him. So he has his own chains as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautifully said. And, I find it very interesting, the naming that Yukimura did here. Balder is a very well-known figure from Norse mythology.
Oh, no kidding.
Who is, he's the son of Odin, and he is a god of light and goodness. He's the one god that everybody loves, except for Loki, who is this trickster, creator of chaos.
Interesting.
So on and so forth. So yeah, it is interesting because there's even this whole story. I'll try to be brief here, but there's a story of Balder who has these dreams, these nightmares of death. And he's so disturbed that he tells his mother, and his mother, out of concern, asks everything in creation to essentially not harm Balder. So everything agrees, every substance on earth, and so then the gods decide to make a game of this, and they throw things at Balder. Nothing will hurt him. They throw rocks at him. They throw, spears, iron, whatever. They throw everything at him, and he just bounces off because everything is agreed not to harm Balder. Well, Loki hates this. He can't stand this game and this joy, and so he goes in disguise. He's as an old woman to ask Balder's mother, is there anything that didn't agree to this? And she says, oh, well, there's this little plant, mistletoe, that I didn't bother asking. It seemed too puny to bother. And then Loki goes and he gets a bit of mistletoe, and he goes to one god, Hoder, who's blind. And so he's not participating in the game. He's not throwing stuff at Balder. And Loki says, why aren't you playing? And he says, well, I can't see. He says, well, here, I'll tell you what. I had this little thing you can throw at Balder. I'll put it in your hand and I'll guide you, and you just toss it. And when that happens, the mistletoe turns into a spear and it kills Balder.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it kills him and he dies, and everything in creation is weeping. And they arrange to send a messenger to hell, and to the goddess Hel and the place Hel, and they ask her to please release Balder. Everybody loves him. And she says, well, if everybody agrees to cry for Balder, then I'll release him. And guess what? Guess who doesn't cry? in disguise.
Oh.
Loki, of course. So Balder is this figure of light and goodness and sacrifice, whereas you have the figure, and by the way, Nanna is the name of his servant woman, and Nanna is the name of Balder's wife. So I don't think that's accidental either. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Yukimura gives the name Nanna to a servant woman who is serving. I think that's a little bit later we learn her name, but she appears in book 10.
Interesting.
So anyway,
that does have me curious. So you said Loki is the trickster's name.
Yes, but it does sound very close to Floki, doesn't it?
Yes, I was thinking the same. Which Floki clearly dearly loves his grandson.
Yes, of course.
I'm actually a touch surprised that he didn't name Garm. Is that his Garm?
Garm would have been a great Loki.
Spear. Yeah, especially since the spear is what ended up killing him. Not that they have a grudge against each other, but it would have been an interesting choice. Has me curious what volume 4, or I mean arc 4, might have in store for him.
Yeah, it's really curious that, and then Floki, while he isn't quite like Loki in being a mischievous figure, he does create a lot of chaos, and pain.
That's true.
He has, of course, from the very beginning, he's behind, as you know, the death of Thor's, and among other things. So maybe he was going in that direction. It's hard to say.
Sure, and
that was interesting.
He did kill Thor's. No, it was arrows. I was thinking they threw spears at him, but it was arrows.
It was arrows. That's right.
You're right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Trying to draw too much similes. Well, I don't know what I'm saying.
But he does, I think, draw from that tradition. He wouldn't have named that kid Balder without knowing the echoes, the resonance that comes with that god who is important sacrificial figure. And the kid also tries to be a sacrificial figure in this arc.
That is true.
Yeah,
that is true. Very good point. Yeah. We also have with Floki, speaking of him, we get to see a lot more than we've seen recently of Thorfinn's internal struggle.
Yeah.
Him really being filled with rage once again at now knowing that he was responsible for his father's death and still has the chance to avenge him. He can fulfill that role. He can slide back into that. Of course, we have Hild there to remind him what it'll cost. Yeah. But he could determine that that's worth it to him if he wanted to.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of Hild, I really do love her presence in this arc. And she's just an interesting figure, brooding and always there. And you kind of trying to guess what's going on in her head. She says, "I'm only here to make sure, and I'm going to kill you the moment, you slip, buddy."
Right.
But she seems a bit too helpful for just that, doesn't she?
I do agree. She seems too helpful. She seems to have his back a couple of times. And I think that there's a piece of her that doesn't believe that he has changed, but there's a piece of her that I think really, really hopes that he has.
Yeah.
Which I think also gives herself some hope of being able to release her past as well, if she can see that he truly has released his.
Yes, so true. Yeah, and she's in that sense probably rooting for him, because in that way she's rooting for herself.
Yeah, and Floki is to Thorfinn what Thorfinn is to her now that Askeladd is gone. So, being able to witness him resolve that issue in his life is a pretty big deal for her, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So I have to point out a panel that you shared with me at one point, and it's this. It's.
Yes. Do you want to tell that story?
I guess I can. I mean, it was very funny because you shared it with me, because you're ahead of me in the reading.
Yeah.
You said, "Look, I found you." Because it's Sigurd who's hero worshiping Thorkel, and he's like, wow, and he's like,
I've read all the sagas.
I know all the sagas. And of course, that's me. I'm very, very much excited about the sagas like Sigurd here.
Yeah.
It's so funny too, because it does set up a lot of things with these two. Thorkel is the real deal, whereas Sigurd is trying to fit this mold,
Yes,
right?
yes, very much so. He wants to be what Thorkel has made a legend of himself to be. Yeah, so when I read that, I laughed and I emailed you, and the subject line was just "found you," and then I sent this single panel of him just being so excited.
Yeah, I mean, it was perfect. It was perfect. But yeah, Thorkel being that old school. We have another person here too who's very old school, and that's Vagen. Yeah, there he is. And he's his tears. See the necklace he's wearing with
I do.
that's Thor's hammer, that
Oh,
pendant. And we've seen these before. We know that people who wear these are pagans, right? So
interesting.
Vagen is very old school. He's into vengeance as that, that heroic code. Somebody
Yeah,
takes one of yours, you're obligated to take one of theirs. So this says a lot.
that's
This
fascinating.
pendant, it's a Thor's hammer, which is in contrast to those who wear a cross, right?
Hmm.
So we know what his allegiances are just based on that little detail. It's a
Interesting.
great example of Yukimura putting details in there, and his is very
Mhm.
elaborate, so you can see just how dedicated he is to the
Yeah.
old ways, right?
Right. And he's taken one of Askeladd's men into captivity,
Yep.
and it looks like he's had quite a rough time while
Yes.
he's been with them. Is this, I don't remember, is this the man that Askeladd said, "Go be with your family or I'll
That's
kill
him.
you"?
That's him.
Wow. So this was the
Yeah.
man that Askeladd set free and wanted him to find a better life. And he
Yep.
ended up being captured here by the Joms Vikings.
And he obviously didn't listen to Askeladd. He
Right.
kept living that life of raiding and pillaging and hurting others rather than being productive, and rather than living a life of creativity. He kept leading that life of destruction. And we see again with Thorfinn a similar temptation to stay in that old way.
Right.
He's obviously, when he learns that Floki is responsible for his father's death,
Yeah.
his initial reaction is,
Yeah. He's very consumed. He's very confronted by many aspects of his previous life.
yep, yep.
And I can imagine the struggle of continuing on the path in this case.
Yeah, and who's watching him? Hild is there watching him, sort of,
Hmm.
in a strange sort of way. I see her a little bit as like a guardian angel, who's watching over him in a
Yeah.
kind of a grumpy guardian angel, I guess.
Sure. A threatening one.
So,
No,
but
I agree. And we also, as we're here, we see, I guess I probably can't show this either. We see the women.
yes,
We see the man come out of the hut, and she realizes that, or the shelter. She
yeah,
realizes that these women are being held captive for the
yep,
purpose of the men.
yep.
And I really, you made a point of something that I never considered in our last discussion,
Hmm.
and I wanted to continue that discussion here. You mentioned that probably a piece of her guilt that she carries on her is the fact that we never found out what happened to her sister,
Yeah,
and that she may have been sold away. Who knows? She may have been kept.
probably, yeah,
Who knows? Um, and then here she is being right. She's seeing women who are met
yeah,
with a fate that is potentially similar to the fate that her sister was left with.
yep.
Um, and she sees, and it affects her very, very strongly.
Her
Hmm.
reaction. You're so right. That's a great connection. And I think, yeah, I mean, in addition to just being compassionate beneath that really tough veneer,
Hmm.
she probably is thinking about her sister. You're so right.
Yeah. Well, I never considered that. I saw this and it made me love Hilda even more, that, when Thorfinn, when he was in the midst of his rage arc, that he would walk away. And then she, in the midst of her rage arc, sees this and is personally affronted, wants to rescue these women,
Yeah.
um, confronts the men about it. And I loved that for her. But yeah, what you had said previously made me draw an even stronger connection for this scene.
Yeah, yeah, and you're so right. It's a great example. I made that connection in the previous one. You made this connection here, which was like, wow, this is a great point. And that's the wonderful thing about these conversations, is that how these things emerge during the course of these conversations. So that's wonderful. And then you have this guy showing up.
Let me see if it'll,
Yes,
there we
that's the
go.
previous page where he's ready to do his thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
He's so much fun every time he's on the page.
He is. He steals the show, that's for sure. Although
He does.
he's a bit of a rival in this particular volume, though, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love you get to see a little bit of his intelligence here with him pretending to shake in his boots and calling out Wolf, I believe it is, and just like not being willing to be manipulated.
That's right. That's right. And determined to live that old Viking lifestyle. And he's like an embodiment of all of those ideals that so many others are just trying to live up to. It seems like he just has them. They're there.
Yes.
Larger than life, you know.
Very, very true. Unfortunately, his quest was stolen from him.
Yes.
He didn't quite, once again, he isn't able to have his fight like he wanted.
Yes, yeah, by Garm, and at the same time too, you have poor Sigurd, who wants so much to fit in this mold as well.
Yeah, he's essentially taken on a new goal. I mean, I'm sure Girded is still on his mind at this point, but being in Thorkel's army is really what matters the most to him at the moment.
It's about his honor. It's about trying to live up to his father, you know. And there's so many father-son relationships here, and that's really looming over Sigurd's thread here is his father's ideals that he's trying so hard to live up to and to reclaim his honor, and it's just such a pathetic thing.
Yeah. No, I very much agree.
Yeah. So
what were your initial impressions of Garm?
I was kind of annoyed by Garm. I mean, it was just, come on. He's obviously got a sort of one-track mind, I guess. And he's very it's just it came to a point where I felt a bit bad for him. And I think you know what I mean. Is it probably it's the next book
I think so.
A little more background on him. But even here you can tell there's something, he's very damaged in some way, or he's very different. And he's like Thorkel in some ways too.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes, massively so. Yeah. Yes. There's even a line at one point where Thorkel says, could he be one of my bastards? Because they're so similar.
Yeah. And his name, I agree with you that Loki would have felt right. But his name, Garm, is, of course, this giant dog from Norse mythology who does some pretty destructive stuff too, especially in the book. So yeah, he's named after a fairly tough, destructive entity as well, I guess. Yeah.
My first impressions of him were quite positive. I was pretty excited because he's fun. And, like he brings some action. He's an interesting character. I like his character design. I just think that he was a good time. I kind of tipped more to the, oh, come on, as I got to know him a bit better. Because I feel that Hild is already such a great external representation of what Thorfinn is facing. And he's already getting a lot of obstacles and a lot of reminders of his past. And he's already getting a lot. And Garm is basically this killing machine. Like, I want to fight. I want a fight to the death. And I will not give up until I get it. Yeah. It's a good representation of, like, in the previous arc, Thorfinn talks his way out of his situation with Canute. And that's great. And Garm is a good representation of talking your way out of things will not always work. Sometimes people just have bloodlust and they're not your friends, like Thorkel. So it's like, it's just not going to work out. But he's a bit one note for me. And
he is very much,
he feels a little bit too much like plot needed him. So here he is, you know? Yeah. But I still had fun with him, It's not a huge deal to me.
Yeah, he is flat character, but a very vivid one.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's a good way of putting it.
yeah. I mean, he's exuberant and all of that. So it was fun. I agree.
We did get some really fun fight scenes out of him, which I enjoyed a lot.
Yeah, in fact, I thought that these 2.5 books, actually picked up the pace again, and
Oh, I agree.
a lot more action.
Yeah.
Reminding me much more of the first arc in terms of the amount of combat and action and all of that.
Yeah, definitely between Garm and then, not to bring spoilers into this, but there's a battle that comes.
Yeah.
Lots of action.
Yeah, plenty of action. We also have a little bit of Canute in a way. He's present. He's not exactly in the present of the story, but his influence is exerting itself. And you even have Thorfinn at one point wondering, why is Canute not, what's he doing here? Why isn't he, why isn't he putting a stop to all this? His deal is he's supposed to do it his way. I'm supposed to do it my way. And so we get some answers to that eventually too. What Canute is up to. Gesundheit.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. So we do have a bit of that going on in this one. We get the final answers in the next book, though, I think.
Yes. We also got to kidnap Thorfinn's found family.
Yeah.
So that's a bumski.
Yep, it is a big time. And of course, this is all because of Garm's bloodlust. And he's found Thorfinn and he's trying to provoke him into a fight. And he thinks this is going to do it. There's Vagen. It's like, that looks familiar, doesn't it? It looks a bit like some
imagery we've seen.
Canute's father, but it's Vagen.
Yeah.
And it's a great transition, actually, because here he is trying to provoke Thorfinn. And he does it with this head, and you get Thorfinn's reaction.
Yeah.
And then you get someone else's reaction, but it's to the other part. It's to the body.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Nice.
what the hell? He took my fight from me. He's upset for a different reason, right?
Right. Yes. Very true. Very true. I didn't really make that connection, but that's really funny the way he set that up.
I think Yukimura is great at transitions. He often does stuff like these little parallels.
Yes.
So Thorkel is very, to say the least, upset.
Yes.
About this because he had been looking forward to this so much.
Right, which sets us up for Thorkel and Garm to eventually be able to meet.
Exactly, and they have their knockdown, drag out, big time, combat scene there, which is, kind of part of that. I also thought there was more comedy in this arc within,
mostly with Bug Eyes,
and then later on there's kind of a bit of fart humor in here, which is
man, I just graze past that. I don't even pay attention to that stuff.
But yeah, he was having some fun in here as well, I think. And maybe Garm was part of that as well in a way. So
yeah, he definitely brings a lot of lightheartedness to it. Just because he just comes off as very fun despite what he is.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, so he tried to provoke him with the head. He tried to provoke him with his words and with his actions. And then eventually he's like, all right, fine. I'll force you into a fight. I'll take your people. Yeah. And that's a good plan. It is probably what will be the most effective way.
Yep. And it puts Thorfinn in another dilemma in terms of how is he going to stick to those ideals that he'd resolved to have. Just a quick aside too, I thought that Garm was also, especially the way he used his weapon, reminded me more of Japanese martial arts style
interesting.
than Viking, which is cool because I think you see a lot of this influence of philosophy and sometimes things like fighting and things like that work their way in here, which is kind of neat, actually. There's a lot of Buddhist philosophy in these books as well, in terms of the nonviolence connection to the world around you. But I thought that Garm's combat style really reminded me not so much of Viking as more as a more Eastern, maybe Japanese combat style.
Interesting. Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I like that with Thorfinn, with Hild, and now with Garm, you get a lot of people using traditional weapons that, or I guess with Hild, she essentially invented her weapon, but weapons that we're familiar with, but they find really unique, clever ways to use them, which only makes these combat scenes more fun.
Yep. And of course, Thorfinn's consistent response is he finds that way to resist by running away. Instead of, he says, you're talking like there are two options, you die or I die, but guess what? There's another option. And he takes off, which is great because I've mentioned martial arts a little while ago. My daughter took Taekwondo for a while, and I remember very distinctly her instructor always emphasizing number one option is run away.
Right.
You can run away. That's the easiest way to resolve these things. And Thorfinn is trying to do that.
Yeah, and it would be effective if it were a simple situation of maybe a misunderstanding, or, a lot of conflicts could be resolved that way. But because Garm is so targeted, it's simply not going to work, which I think is good because his very nonviolent, passive, avoid conflict at any point lifestyle, that does need to be challenged, that there will be times where there will be people that will just keep on, and there's no talking your way out of it. There's no evading your way out of it. They will keep on, and kind of having to reckon with that as well.
Yep. And you're absolutely right that Garm essentially forces it because he kidnaps his friend, Thorfinn's friends, and knocks out poor Bug Eyes, who had his moment of bravery there. Go Bug Eyes.
Yeah, he actually tried. He didn't, he wasn't going to just evade himself. He really, really tried.
Yeah, he did a pretty good job. He tried. He had his gotcha sucker moment, which worked on Einar. It worked on Einar, but not so well on Garm.
Yeah.
So, and then he ends up in a comedic way trying to take care of the baby. And there's some of the fart humor where the baby's making all kinds of digestive noises.
Right. Yeah. I feel like he would have been so much better served to be a prisoner. The worst person to take care of the child is the one that ends up doing it.
The one who would least want to do that. Yeah. More terrifying than being a prisoner, perhaps.
Yeah, for him.
What did you think of the wolves? That scene that was a flashback with Canute and his helper Wolf. It's a sort of 6 months ago or 6 months previously. And this is where Canute is telling Wolf, not in explicit terms because there are other people present, but the wolves become a metaphor. This is another thing he does a lot, Yukimura, is he makes animals into symbols, and the wolves become a symbol of all the Vikings, the Yams Vikings especially, going around pillaging, hurting people, kidnapping people. And we mentioned before how Thorfinn is wondering, Canute, why are you letting this stuff happen? Well, he's not. He has a plan here. And he's telling Wolf, here's the plan. We got to get rid of these wolves. We're gonna find a way. And the wolves are the Yams Vikings, the raiders, the pillagers. He wants to establish a kingdom with more stability and peace and that sort of thing. So they have a plan to set these wolves against each other, essentially, or to poison them because they're harming the populace too much. Sheep are us regular folks, right?
Right.
So I thought that was a cool scene.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's another scene that really helps us to see more of Canute's motivation and why he's going the direction that he's going. And we get some good parallels, which I suppose we can't talk about in this one, between him and Thorfinn as well, as far as, their ultimate goal and what they ultimately want to achieve, which, like I said, will come up in the next bit.
Cool. Yeah. And of course, this guy's not buying it. Thorkel is not going to be manipulated. He's going to die when he wants to die, right? And that's the old Viking way. He wants to stick to that no matter what. So he's not having any of it. So he refuses to be manipulated. So there he is, right? That's the Viking way, right?
Oh, yeah. Thorkel is... Yeah, I mean, we've already said it. He's such a great presence for this manga.
Yeah, yeah. But then we do get quite in the beginning of this, I guess there's a lot of elements that are just coming together here, where the Jomsvikings fortress is, and leading up to the next book, which is really just lots of chaos and battle and fast-paced stuff, really, and continuing the very important thematic work too, I think, with poor Thorfinn being put in the situation where you have his friends who've been in prison now because of Garm. And Garm's plan doesn't actually go the way he wants either, does it?
No, no, not at all. Yeah, he continues to, well, hold on. I'm trying to find where you are. Do you have a page number?
So around 232, where
232.
poor Garm ends up in jail too. He's not a happy customer there.
Yeah, that's true. He does. And then we have, I'm sorry, the little boy. What was his name again?
Oh, Balder.
Balder. We have Balder, who ends up rescuing, not Garm, the others.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, which is part of his resistance to the role that his grandfather has tried to forge for him. You have this kid who is, by the way, let's note, he's a cousin of Thorfinn's.
Right.
And very much like Thorfinn. There are some panels in here, which I think we're close to, where there's a very deliberate parallel made between Thorfinn and Balder, who are both trying to resist these ideals of violence that surround them. So I thought that was an interesting thing that he was doing there. When Thorfinn arrives and finally meets up with his cousin, it's a pretty cool moment, I thought.
It is. I agree. We also get, speaking of people meeting up with each other, we get to see Garm presented. Let me see if I can find the exact panel to Thorkel, and so we finally get them being face to face.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is.
Yes, indeed. Like, so they tried to give him up in order to appease Thorkel and say, look, here's the idiot who killed Vagan, have him, do what you want. And then Thorkel gets talked into a duel, which of course both of them seem to love. So
yeah, it's the perfect situation for both of them. Thorkel finally gets to let out some of his bloodlust, as well as Garm. They're both just having the time of their lives, which I actually really wish that this fight was a little bit longer.
Yeah, they don't get into the details of it too much. In the meantime, you also have Sigurd, who's more of a wannabe. He doesn't quite have that same bloodlust, although he'd like to think he does. He's imagining himself fighting by Thorkel's side and all of that. It's his friends, though, that seem to get him, that actually understand him better than he does.
They do. Absolutely, they do. They understand him, and they're constantly calling him out, and he just does not get it. I mean, he is so thick-headed.
Yes, he is.
He's just like, friends, you useless bungling cowards, you mean henchmen, don't you? And the way that they just like let it slide off their back, and they're just like, no, I mean, we are your friends, deal with it, essentially. You definitely don't have henchmen.
Poor guy. And here's what I meant by the parallels. So here you have Thorfinn on his way, and deeply concerned about his friends, Einar, Leif, Gudrid, please be okay. It says,
right.
The next, I think it was probably the next issue or whatever, but guess who's there? In a very similar pose. It's Balder. He's within the fortress doing his best to save these people, in spite of his grandfather's determination to kill everything in his grandson's path.
Yeah, absolutely. And this scene, I don't know if you thought the same thing as me. I guess this is just his childishness, or youngness coming through. But this mentality of give them your clothes, they'll be in the cell for you, and I'll get you out. It's like, that's a nice thought, but you're now leaving these people vulnerable. Like they're going to be caught that they helped the prisoners escape, and now they're going to be killed.
Or he could have just probably, I mean, my guess is in his mind, at least, he could just explain, look, I made them do it. I ordered them to do this. So they had no choice. You know, he could say
Yeah,
that.
that's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
He also may have suspected that he would be able to return and
Free
release them.
Yeah.
Yeah, not expecting to have the complications that they ended up having.
But it is a very childlike plan, and it
Yes.
doesn't quite go the way everyone hoped either.
Yeah.
It was close. It was close.
Yeah, he really did try, and he's such a likable character, you know, fitting for the name, I suppose, now that I know more about the history. But yeah, he's such a likable character. He's genuinely trying so hard despite being so young.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you have all these things going on at once. So this is really feels very fast paced. You have these two in their duel. You have Balder trying to save them, and they get close. But what happens is they pause after Einar and Leif have made it. They pause because it's Gudrid who offers this possibility. Why don't you run away too? Right?
Yeah, which I love because, you know, she was trapped. She was chained by her role that was expected of her. And Thorfinn gave her a way out. And so now here she is presented with a child who is chained by his role. And now she's attempting to give him a way out. I loved that.
Very similar to how Thorfinn was a slave and wanted Gudrid to come along with him because he understood how she was enslaved essentially in this role that was being forced on her. So she does the same thing. Yeah, she offers the same thing in that moment to Balder, which is really cool. I mean, I love how he does that.
No, I agree. And of course, speaking of what a lot of things going on at once, we also have this epic battle going on in the background of it all and in the foreground, really. But, you know, we've got these panels of just destruction and it's really powerful. And then we see it inside the walls as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. I love how you're so right. There are times when he zooms out and you get this big epic kind of feel to it. And then I think importantly, even with some minor people, he gives us these connections to, okay, here's this old timer, right? And they call him Pops. And he's talking about, this is my last battle. I'm going to retire and go fish with the grandkids and all that. And then, of course, he gets hit with a missile and he's not much left of him on the next page. So you get a sense that of all these individual tragedies wrapped up in this. So it's not just, wow, this is glorious. It's actually gory and it's horrible. And
he does a very good job of humanizing very small role characters so that we can feel the impact of the individual in a war. And then speaking of humor, which you brought up, that this leans into it more, we have Gerded at the well, and it's hoy, quit wasting time, you'll miss the escape route. He's trying to blame it on her stomach. or more fart humor.
There's more fart humor in there, which I thought was I mean, I actually don't laugh a ton while I'm reading these, but these kind of made me laugh. I have to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
I
have a pretty.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just saying, I have a pretty juvenile sense of humor. So
fart jokes have never done. I have a very juvenile sense of humor, but fart jokes have never done it for me.
Okay.
But I do love her essentially hitting him in the head with the bucket to make him shut up, so that she can get them out of there, and just she chooses to stay behind.
Yeah, she has some great comedic moments in here too.
Oh my goodness! I just realized I'm muting this every time I cough, but I'm recording through this external mic. So it's all still going to record my cough.
Oh, I hear you all the whole time.
So. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I'm not really hearing the cough, so it's
good.
Fine. Yeah.
Well, that's because I'm muting it on your end, but the recording will probably still have it.
Not to
Hopefully
worry.
It won't. Hopefully I'm wrong.
Not to worry. So we're getting close to the end, really, of book 10. And there were a couple, I think, more significant scenes in here that we could talk about a bit. But and there's
big time. Like, for instance, Thorkel being burnt.
Yeah.
Oh man, he goes through some suffering in this one.
Yeah, but it's just like he's so determined that he just tries to ignore all of that. I mean, the guy is just relentless. Yeah.
We also
And
see Sigurd rescue them when Leif has been hurt.
yeah, I thought that was significant. Sigurd's, there are indications more and more of Sigurd's character and maybe having a bit more to him than you might have thought at first. Which
I love Siggy.
Yeah, Siggy becomes a little more lovable in here.
Yeah, he's like this arc's Omar.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Yeah. And then also, I think just to wrap it up pretty soon here, there he is when he realizes too, the look on his face, who he's just rescued. The fact is he just rescued somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And they thank
combat.
him and he's just like, oh yeah, no problem. Just go over there. This is where you're going to get fixed up. Like he is an active participant. You can tell that he's aware of his surroundings and what his role is. And he's really thriving in this role. He's doing a great job.
Yep. 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 He really is. And so you're seeing a little bit, and he knows these people. He's like, oh, you, right? So that's an interesting moment there. There are lots of those in this arc where these people come together again, almost like by accident in the midst of this action.
Yeah.
And the reactions are important. The reactions are important, and they tell you a lot about a person in a moment like that. And we're getting a little more depth to Siggy here. Yeah. This guy's, though, his reactions are always pretty predictable.
They are, and they're always funny.
He's got his hair singed, and he's just all wrapped
bandaged up. Yes.
And he's just, give me my axe.
Get me back in there. I'm not done fighting.
Yeah.
And then here we have Siggy thriving in his role, doing very well. But as soon as he finds out that Gerded is in danger, he flips that switch. He gets back to what his original goal was, and he wants to rescue her. He wants to do everything that he can to help. When I'm sure you're in the same spot.
Yeah, I'm close to it. Yeah, when they all meet up and there's all this like everybody at once, there's all these threads just going to come together there. But yeah, you're absolutely right about Sigurd. Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course the final panel in this volume is Thorfinn saying, "Okay, all right, don't worry, I'll solve this," which has become the burden on him of always being the one that needs to solve this. I'll figure it out. I'll save the day again. I'll do it again. Which, I feel like he's just got stones piled up on his shoulders.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the fact that it's Gudrid inside.
Yeah.
And it's possible that he hasn't quite figured out his feelings yet in relation to Gudrid, but obviously deeply concerned for her as a friend, as a part of their found family in that moment too. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's pretty much where we leave off. Any final thoughts about book 10?
I think we've discussed it all. I thought it was a really fun volume. I enjoyed it despite, our little nitpicks around Garm. I thought that it was really fun. It was a great build up to what is inevitably a very action-packed, intense ending to the arc.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that. And that discussion is going to be on your channel.
Yes.
And that will be next Tuesday. So everybody, I'm sure that is going to be a really good one because the arc does finish on a bang.
It really does.
Yeah. All right. Well then, thank you so much, Merphy. This was a lot of fun, and I'm excited to continue speaking about books 11 and half of 12.
Half of 12.
All right, everybody. Till next time.